So what everybody's waiting on is the velocity of money. What they're waiting on is the hyperinflation aspect of the dollars. They're waiting for the dollar to kind of inflate away, or inflate to infinity, and then what that does is that shoves your real assets, gold, Bitcoin, etc., into the stratosphere, right? And that's what a bunch of people are waiting on. I don't think that's going to happen the way that people think it's going to happen this time, because you also have the factor of all the illegals that are being flooded into the country. Consider it this way. If 50 million illegals got deported right now, right, there would be massive vacancies everywhere. What you would see is prices, nominal value on assets dropping drastically all over the country. There's your apartment complexes, houses, etc. These are all the things that the banks have lent out insane amounts of money on, insane amounts of dollars that they've lent out on all of this. So they can't have that stuff come down in value, or at least in perceived value, which is why I'm convinced now more and more why some of these underwriters will do these absurd deals, these absurd, like ridiculous mortgages with people where someone says, hey, I want to buy a duplex, and somebody green lights a duplex for $650,000, at some bank institution that the duplex isn't even worth like $275, especially with today's interest rates. So because of the cash flow amount. So what they're doing here is they're staving off all of this inflation, all the hyperinflation, and they're going to be able to do it probably indefinitely. Here's why: they've taken over all of the assets and all of the means of production, right? Let me say that in a Soviet accent: means of production. They've taken over all the means of production. So think of it this way: let's say you subsidize the shit out of a bunch of fucking illegals, and they work at a company that you own, and then you give them money, and then they spend all of their money, all of their dollars, at businesses you own as well, right? Well, now you've created what's called a closed loop system, okay? And now the inflation, you can now export that inflation to people who are not being subsidized. In other words, Americans. See, Americans aren't being subsidized nearly as heavily as the illegals, right? Particularly American men. Particularly American men are deliberately not being subsidized. And of course, if an American man gets an American woman pregnant, she's encouraged to abort the child. I don't make the rules. This is just what they're doing. Again, remember, you have to understand, elites don't want critical thinkers. They don't want education like this. Okay, they don't want stuff like this. They don't want conversations like this, especially among people, which is why they want TikTok gone. Okay, they don't want these kinds of conversations. This kind of stuff leads to people thinking, and thinking leads to asking questions, and asking questions leads to looking for answers. And then when you start looking for the answers, what you're going to find out is that it's this. I've said this repeatedly. It's the same group of people. It's the same group of people that are causing all the inflation, that are dealing with all the taxes, that are causing all the taxes to increase, that are causing all of your insurance premiums to rise, and charging all the interest rates. It's the same people. It's always been the same people. It's always been the same thieves and beggars that have managed to get themselves into positions of power. Because, see, what happens when you vote somebody in a lot of cases in the past, and this happens a lot, right? People, when they decide they want to vote for somebody, not vote against somebody. That's a thing now. Back in the day, you would vote for like maybe a mayor or something, and you voted for someone you really liked, and you liked what they thought, and you liked their value system, which was even more important actually than them being really intelligent. You wanted their value system. Well, so if you're voting for someone based on their values, they may or may not be smart enough to know when they're being duped, to know when they're being, when they're being Iago'd, so to speak, okay? And that's what happens, okay? So so what they do is they get an advisor in there, for example. So Trump, there's a lot of reasons to not like Trump. The biggest one that my problem is his idea of keeping these advisors around him that are the worst like scum of the fucking earth. And the whole idea of, keep your enemies close. Yeah. Whoever said that didn't have very many enemies, and that's a complete bullshit line, right? Good movie, but a bullshit line, okay? That's just not how this works. When these guys do this kind of stuff, right, they take advantage, they learn everything about, these are very crafty people, okay, they're very clever, and what they do is they get they get well-meaning people to start doing, really shitty things. And before you know it, after about, 20, 30, 40, 50 years goes down the road, this creates all the problems. That's where you're seeing all the problems now, right? So here we are 100 years after, 110 years, 110 odd, 112 odd years after the creation of the Federal Reserve. And look where we are, complete disaster. So now you actually have to, if you're gonna vote for somebody, you have to find somebody that's actually smart enough to know when someone's lying to them and filling their heads with a bunch of nonsense that isn't gonna work long term. And that's the hard part. So now you have this sort of, this uphill battle of not only trying to find somebody that has some kind of values that are at least somewhat resonant with the population, but also are smart enough to know that all these people around them are the same thieves and beggars that have, because they're well dressed, it doesn't make them any less scumbags than they already are. Make sense? So that said, I don't think that you're going to see the type of inflation, because again, unfortunately, there is a cultural aspect to this. It really is, and it's hard to ignore this, okay? So I don't think you're going to see the type of inflation that a lot of you think that you're going to see with this, at least not without help, right? Like if you wanted to help it inflate, what you would do is you would do the smartest thing, in my view, and I've been saying this for a long time now, is that, the so-called right, and many of them, again, they have okay values, kind of, but they're not very bright. I haven't met anybody on the right that's particularly intelligent, okay? It's just, personally, okay? I haven't met a whole lot of guys that are really all that smart. So you have to get those guys to understand that the reason why you want minimum wage to be increased to $500 to $1,000 an hour isn't because you think you're gonna make everybody rich. Okay, that's just stupid, right? We all know how that works. You increase minimum wage to $500 an hour, all it means is that your Big Mac cost $1,000 or whatever, or, $450 or whatever it is. Okay, we all know that that's what ends up happening. That's not why you do it. You're not doing it to try and make everybody rich. You're not doing it to try and make everything better. The reason you're doing it is to get rid of the dollar, is to collapse the dollar so that way we can have an accurate accounting and an actual assessment of what's going on in the world and find out where values actually are. Price values, okay, because prices are important. Price is price is actually how we communicate, if you think about it in those terms. And in order to do that, you have to be able to get rid of the dollar, because the dollar can be printed from nothing, right? And it can be just, and this is why, again, you're not going to see the inflation numbers. You're not going to see the hyper type inflation, where every day it changes, where every day you go to the store and then the price changes and stuff. Like, you're not going to see that kind of hyper type inflation, not for a while, unless you help it. The faster we get through this, the faster that the dollar dies, the faster you can actually have an honest accounting. And then, of course, at that point, the illegals that are here, if they want to stay and actually rebuild the country, the thing is that at that point, they're kind of welcome, right? You're kind of welcome if you're actually bringing skills to the game and you want to do something for the country. All right, you're welcome to stay. But you're here because you want to build the country, not because you're just here for the welfare benefits, right? That's the difference. And of course, most would self-deport. If there wasn't a bunch of benefits, they would just take off and go back to their own country. Because why would you stay in a country here that doesn't speak your language and the culture is different? You would go back to your country where the culture matched your values, right? I mean, it's just reality. I would. Okay, I mean, if there's no reason for me to really stay someplace, I'm going to take off. So that's how this works. So for those out there that are thinking that, like, well, we're going to have any day now to the moon, with like, dude, no, because the inflation isn't going to hit the way you think it's going to hit, because it can be disguised for the longest time by just within the closed loop system. If you had a country of small businesses, you'd see it like that. For real, if you had millions and millions of actual small businesses, and I don't mean small businesses the way you think of small businesses right now, right, where everybody's OnlyFans and internet, and like that's not what we're talking about. If you had real small businesses, meaning these are businesses that, like, your small farms, and you had all these other real small businesses where the people that are working in these businesses are the owners, and they're brewing their own productive stuff, and they have their own means of production, you would start seeing hyperinflation. In fact, you can see this with anybody who provides anything of any quality for any quality, not inequality, but any quality, their prices are going way up, right? Well, yeah, because they're specialists, okay? So if you want something done that's highly specialized and customized, that's going to be more expensive, right? Well, that's what you're seeing right now. So if everybody did that, right, let's say that there were millions and millions of small businesses the way they're supposed to be, which is a lot harder to control, by the way, than it is to control, a handful of mega corporations with compromised CEOs that were visiting, an island in the, off the coast of Florida, that whole island thing that I can't say on the internet because it'll get algorithmically distorted as soon as I say the word. But you know what island I'm talking about. These guys are all compromised, and it's much easier to control those guys, control maybe 500, 600 of those guys, than it is to try and control tens of millions of tiny businesses. Much easier, and it's much easier to control their prices and inflation, and that's what's happening right now.